For the most part, Pixar has a surprisingly good track record when it comes to sequels. Okay, mostly good track record. And we're happy to say that we think that Inside Out 2 is a great one. So with another existential crisis complete, today we're ranking all of the characters in Inside Out 1 and 2, from good to most heroic. Spoilers ahead.
I plan for the future. Oh, I can show you. You're gonna love this.
Now, given the core message of these movies is just every emotion is important, there aren't any characters we'd describe as outright bad or evil. So today we're gonna start with the least upstanding citizens to the most pure-hearted standing with the gray area. And we could come up with any number of reasons why we're giving the lowest spot on our list to anxiety, but come on, she is the literal personification of a mental illness. And we were already ready to place her in the evil category for that alone, and I'm sure anyone else in the audience who's had to deal with one of these little orange ragdolls of their own would agree. But maybe we can show some grace. Anxiety acts as the main antagonist of Inside Out 2, and her whole goal is basically to rebuild Riley's personality from the ground up, so that she can fit in with the cool kids. Like Fear, her main motivation is fear, but in her own words, the main difference is that Anxiety fears what she can't see.
And my job is to protect her from the scary stuff she can't see.
This results in her essentially gaining a tyrannical rule over Riley's mind, forcing others to think up anything that could possibly go wrong, and being willing to capture anyone who gets in her way. Now, to her very limited credit, Anxiety does have good intentions. Add that to the list of sentences I thought I would never say. She genuinely does want Riley to be happy, to have good friends, to make the hockey team, and live a good life as a whole. It's just that her way of going about this is, it's atrocious, really. She uses her talent for overthinking to remake Riley's personality from the ground up, causing her to betray herself constantly for the sake of fitting in. When she realizes what she's been doing to poor Riley all along, she is genuinely horrified by it and decides to relinquish control. While she never truly fades, she and Joy cooperate to make sure that she never goes quite so overboard again. Not only is taking a break a really good piece of advice for anxious people in general, but it proves that Anxiety, the character, not the illness, isn't actually evil. She just gets overwhelmed very easily. Still, her misdeeds are enough to place her at the lowest spot on our list by a long shot. And I think we speak for everyone with Anxiety when we say, we still don't trust you. You might mean well, but we still don't trust you. No offense. Taking the second lowest spot, let's give a quick shout out to the construction workers in Riley's mind. These little blue guys are seen throughout both movies, but most notably in the second film where they infiltrate Riley's mind for their demo day, which is their way of breaking her mind down so they can expand it as she slowly enters adulthood. If you've ever wondered why puberty is such a long, painful process, this isn't that kind of channel, but Inside Out 2 has a fun explanation. These guys show up one day, start smashing your mind, and then leave without finishing their work for presumably years. This might be the only case where giving construction workers the sloth sinner medal makes any sense. They're not bad, they're just doing their job, but they still lack the consideration to give Riley's regular emotions any heads up.
Wow, those guys are jerks.
Not to mention how reckless they are, as one almost chainsawed Fear and his teddy bear in half. Rounding out the bottom three is Jangles. In Riley's mind, Jangles is a monstrous clown creature who lives to terrorize her however he can. In reality, he's just a children's birthday party entertainer who accidentally scared Riley when she was very young, thus leaving her with chronic fear.
Did you say birthday?
He's not an intentionally evil character by any means, and unlike Anxiety, he doesn't run the risk of ruining Riley's life. So we'll give him just a slightly more respectable spot, even though personally, I hate clowns. Next is Riley's deep dark secret. And no, this isn't a manifestation of Riley's fear of the dark, nor is it a cameo of Dark from Orion in the Dark. Rather, this guy represents a secret so heinous that Riley's subconscious has decided to hide it away behind a vault. The secret in question might have gained him an even lower spot, but the post-credits scene reveals that apparently this memory is that of Riley burning a hole in a rug. And if that's your worst secret you have to hide, never change Riley. While it's sure to cause her a lot of jealousy, we have to give the next new emotion, envy, a relatively low spot on our list. First of all, yeah, envy is going to take the envy sinner medal. I don't think we really need to explain that one. But now onto morality. And honestly, in that regard, envy might even be more overtly questionable than anxiety. Nobody likes jealousy, and like anxiety, envy causes people to do a lot of selfish things. In Riley's case, it leads her to abandon her friends in favor of the Firehawks in the hopes that she won't be alone when her old friends go to a different high school. Envy could definitely be doing a lot worse, but she worries more about social status than anything else, and unlike disgust, this is less for the sake of protecting Riley and more for the sake of making sure she has all her wants. Her constant thirst for popularity and inclusion makes her a great right-hand helper to anxiety, leading to her being more involved in her schemes than the other emotions. Now it's time to get to the first character who exists outside of Riley's mind, Coach Roberts. She's not a prominent character by any means, but she's notable for being the one to invite Riley and her friends to the Firehawks training camp. She's also notable for shouting at Riley and friends for not settling down after she told them to in the locker room, causing the whole team to have their phones confiscated. To be fair, she is their coach, so that's just kind of part of her job. She seems like a decent, respectable person in a general sense, but she's also one of those teachers who will punish everyone for the misdeeds of just one student. Don't sweat the small stuff, coach. You could learn a thing or two from Ennui. I guess Ennui is a nice guy. He's that one cousin at family gatherings who just hangs out on his phone until he's spoken to, since there's nobody there near his age. While his stoicism is sometimes used to push Riley further away from her friends and her sense of self as a whole, he is one of the least troublesome of Riley's new emotions, which makes a lot of sense given that his whole character is just the embodiment of boredom and impartiality. And for those reasons, we'd say he's the perfect character to round out the gray area. So now we move into the more overtly good guys of the series, and as you likely would expect, there's definitely more of them. These characters are the good. And kicking this category off is the fourth of Riley's new emotions, embarrassment. And unfortunately for everyone, he's here to stay, so get ready to spend long nights thinking about that one moment from middle school. I'm just kidding, there's definitely more than one. Anyway, embarrassment is more than just a big, shy dude built like Charlie from Smiling Friends. He's much more, in fact. Embarrassment might serve to help anxiety and the others in their goal to remake Riley into a more overthinking, inauthentic person, but he's shown frequently to disapprove of her methods. Several times throughout the movie, he goes against anxiety. Most notably, he refuses to expose that sadness is hiding in the control room while the others go on their journey. While he can't do it openly for fear of being suppressed by anxiety, and does end up helping to capture sadness, embarrassment still does all he can to thwart anxiety's plans from behind the scenes, which makes him the most decent of the newcomers. And I mean, come on, just look at how he carries little envy in the palm of his hand. If that's not adorable big brother energy, I don't know what is. But enough of the rookies, where would we be without the OGs like disgust? One of Riley's original 5 emotions, disgust functions the most similarly to fear by keeping Riley from doing things that are dangerous to her. Except those things are less overtly dangerous, and more so things that would make her feel unhappy or unsafe.
We've got a stairway coming up.
For instance, she'll keep Riley from putting on someone else's mouth guard, or at least from keeping it on. The reason we rank her as the lowest of Riley's original emotions is her role in Riley making her first friend. Her hesitation to help Grace due to her being a social outcast shows a bit of an ego on her, but she does earn points for being a sympathetic friend to the other emotions and placing Riley's well-being above all else at the end of the day. It might be a surprise seeing him this high up, but anger gets to show off a lot more of his good side in the sequel. Don't get the wrong idea, he's still the same short-tempered little red box we all know and love. His outbursts and occasional use of force are enough to give him the Wrath Sinner medal as expected, but when Joy starts to get stressed out during the search for Riley's old self, it's surprisingly anger to calm her down and encourage her not to give up. He also proves himself to be surprisingly resourceful and creative.
Can somebody pinch me?
When the forklift Joy is trying to use won't work, Anger comes up with the idea to use a giant vacuum in reverse to propel them up the wall they're trying to climb. And later on, he calls on the legendary Pouchy to help them out of a bind. But speaking of Pouchy, believe it or not, he's kind of the main reason Anger isn't any higher. I know you were in a rush, man, but how do I put this delicately? You know how you shoved your entire fist into a person's mouth to try and dig out helpful items for your adventure? That's assault, brother. Thankfully, they seem to have made amends by the end of the movie, showing that as angry as Anger is, he's willing to bury the hatchet with the people he's wronged. Moving on to anxiety's less intense, more helpful counterpart, fear. Fear's fatal flaw is pretty obvious. He's admittedly kind of a coward at times due to his fears, which are many. Rather than being a chronic overthinker like anxiety though, he's focused on things that are concrete and overtly dangerous.
Oh, I'm so jumpy, my nerves are shot!
Ew, I don't want to hear about your nerves.
Meaning that he's much more consistently effective at protecting Riley from pain and danger without the need to try and psychologically terrorize her with various hypotheticals. It's also worth noting that Fear is prepared for a disaster inside Riley's mind, like using a parachute he just happened to be wearing to keep the emotions from falling to their deaths. His paranoia is really his worst character trait, and even that's never intended to be a bad thing. Heck, it's usually not even detrimental to Riley or anything. Though in the sequel, he does say at one point that he believes he can fix anxiety, and while we're not sure that's a moral problem, there's definitely something to be said about that. I'm just not sure what. Side note, on the topic of the parachute thing, can emotions die in this universe? What happens if they do? Is it like a lobotomy or something? This is actually the Pixar world I have the most questions about. But for now, let's just finish answering the questions of who's got the best morals, with Joy landing just outside of our top 10. Joy was more or less the protagonist of the first film, and in a sense, also the antagonist. Her insistence on bottling sadness up and keeping her from affecting Riley in any way shows a bit of a control freak nature and a really condescending view of her friend.
It's just really the opposite of what we're going for here.
A point of view that gives her the pride sinner medal. Thankfully though, by the end of the movie, she learns to accept the fact that all of Riley's emotions have important roles to play in her life, and in the second movie, this lesson seems to have stuck. Joy is a lot nicer and more inclusive to sadness, allowing her just as many memories as anyone else. But this is where the new manifestation of Joy's toxic optimism comes into play. Her tendency to throw all of Riley's negative memories away into what is essentially a landfill, leaving her with a sense of perfectionism that makes way for anxiety. And I mean, wow, this movie is way too real. While, like in the first movie, Joy was nothing but well-intentioned here, she did end up affecting her mental state in a negative way. But when anxiety comes around to affect it in a much more negative way, Joy is the one to reach out to her and encourage her to let go. After the storm clears up, Joy reveals that she's become a sort of counselor to anxiety, keeping her from worrying about future events so that Riley can focus on enjoying the present moment. Joy has grown a lot since the first movie, and by her own admission in the second, it's easy for her to get overwhelmed by having to be positive all the time. By embracing sadness as a friend, it's almost like Joy has embraced her own negative emotions and is using them to help the others, which shows that she's not only worthy of being the unofficial captain of Riley's mind, but a much better friend than she was before. Still, we're gonna rank Sadness a bit higher. Sadness acts as the first movie's deuteragonist and teaches perhaps one of the greatest lessons in Pixar history.
It's okay to feel sad sometimes.
And okay it is indeed. Sadness, in a sense, is a much needed source of comfort to those around her. We see this in the first film when she comforts Bing Bong after his rocket is dumped by simply listening to him and giving him a hug when it's needed. And once Joy finally accepts that sadness is a part of life, she's able to do her work to help Riley feel sad for a bit so she can be happy afterwards. In the sequel, after Riley finds out that her friends are going to another high school, it's Sadness who allows her to get in a quick cry session so that she can move on with her day. Out of all the emotions, Sadness is the least aggressive, the least prideful, and at the same time is just as eager to help Riley as the others. But where would any of the emotions be without the girl they belong to, Riley Anderson? This hockey-loving, braces-wearing, anxiety-fueled teenager is back in action with even more screen time. And man, it was painful. Riley's desperation to fit in make her incredibly relatable to the audience. While we see that Riley is a sweet kid, from helping up fallen members of the other hockey team to being a caring person in general, we also see that she's not perfect. Her worst deed, and the one that pretty much lingers over the whole movie, is her tendency to flake on her friends for the sake of getting in good with Valentina Ortiz. She's willing to betray herself and her friendships for the sake of getting close with them, and this ultimately culminates in her knocking Grace down in a hockey-fueled rage. In one of the most stressful scenes in Pixar history. Poor Riley has a panic attack as she struggles to cope with her emotions and just how complex they're becoming. The guilt of having hurt her best friend now toppling that already unsteady tower. Ultimately, she does apologize to her friends and they all make amends, and we have to give her a lot of credit for that. Moving on to Bluefy, Riley's favorite childhood cartoon that she still secretly loves. A parody of Blue's Clues, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, and probably 5 other preschool shows. Bluefy is an adorable pink dog who's always looking to help in indirect ways. He's more than happy to help the emotions escape being bottled up if they return the favor by freeing him from Riley's mind prison. That said, he might not be all there, honestly. But sane or not, Bluefy is a good pal who's always there to offer his services in support of his friends. But speaking of friends, this movie has both old friends and new friends, including Val Ortiz. She takes Riley under her wing, sincerely wanting to include her with the team and make her feel welcome. They have a sort of sisterly relationship going on despite Riley's constant overthinking and anxiety. Val is always genuinely nice to her, even when Riley accidentally gets the group in trouble in the locker room. Val is a sweet girl and doesn't really have a lot of bad traits to speak of. She's the kind of friend everyone hopes to meet in high school. Next is Lance Slashblade. A character from an in-universe fighting game, Lance is a strong man who desires to do good, but darkness is just outside the gate of his lonely heart.
Don't you remember his power move?
While he may be a bit of an edgelord, he's the nice kind, willing to use his legendary special move to break his buddies out, and even willing to sacrifice himself to take down the entire police force. But as important as crushes can be, friends like Bree and Grace are much more so. These two are always happy to hang out with Riley. They even offer to stick on the same team as her at the training camp so they can all spend extra time together before they end up at separate schools. They're also remarkably forgiving. Despite Riley giving them a cold shoulder for most of the movie and almost straight up concussing Grace, they're quick to forgive her. Grace especially deserves extra points for the fact that she was concerned for Riley's distress, even though she'd literally just shoulder bashed her like she was playing Wario Land. Now, before we get to the top 3, there's one more emotion to talk about real quick: nostalgia. While she only appears in a couple of scenes, like literally 2, nostalgia answers the question that mankind has been pondering for ages. Remember the time? Nostalgia literally exists to occasionally remind Riley and her emotions of her happiest, most cherished memories. Only every so often does she come out of her little room, but when she does, it's always pleasant, even if she hasn't quite been invited yet. Still, you have to wonder what she was doing during the whole anxiety hurricane thing. Our bronze medal of good has to go to Pouchy. Whenever someone in Riley's mind needs help, they just need to call Pouchy, and he'll show up with several items that might help. It's admittedly kind of weird that dynamite always seems to be one of said items, and makes you wonder if Pouchy's motives are as pure as he'd have you think. But that doesn't change the fact that he's more than happy to help literally anyone who asks him. And like we mentioned earlier, he becomes good friends with Anger, despite him practically assaulting him. Pouchy is a true altruist, but there are 2 characters who we would give the slight upper hand. Actually, there's technically 3 more, because the silver medal of good has to go to both of Riley's parents. Pixar's parents are usually pretty good, but Riley's stands out even among the others. Despite their struggles, they always do their best to put on a brave face for Riley, cheering her on at hockey games and always showing interest in both how she's doing and what she's doing. Given just how supportive they are of her, constantly hyping her up at games and pretending that burnt chicken looks delightful, there's never any doubt just how loved Riley is. They're also incredibly patient, even when Riley loses her temper with her mom for seemingly no reason. She doesn't get upset with her, instead understanding that the onset of puberty is nigh, and therefore the emotions are high. As far as fictional parents go, Riley is blessed with some of the best. But finally, the character who takes home the gold medal of good is Bing Bong. Bing Bong was Riley's imaginary bestie in her early childhood. We've already mentioned that Bing Bong loves Riley enough to be genuinely devastated when he finds out that she's slowly but surely forgetting about him. That doesn't take away from him being the most loving character in both films though. Bing Bong literally exists to make Riley happy, and he's more than willing to help Joy and Sadness get back to headquarters as a result. On that note, you know how we joked earlier about the whole "do emotions die" thing? Well, we very well might have found out the answer were it not for Bing Bong. He was willing to sacrifice himself so that Joy and Sadness could reach headquarters, only asking in return that they take her to the moon for him.
Take her to the moon for me. Okay?
Without Bing Bong's sacrifice, Joy and Sadness might have never made it back to headquarters, and thus Riley would have, I don't know, but something would have happened. All we know for sure is that his noble sacrifice proves that Bing Bong truly was Riley's friend who likes to play. But more than that, he was Riley's friend who liked her to be happy. That kind of self-sacrificial, albeit imaginary friendship is enough to send him on a rocket to our top spot. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go cry out some candy.